This episode is brought to you by BigMooseCoffeeCompany.co. Welcome to another episode of Everything Endurance. It's good to have you here. While we are on lockdown, the podcasts are going to look like this for a little while. It's you, and it's my Royal Bald Highness sitting here in my salubrious wingback chair. It's just from IKEA. For those of you listening just through headphones at the moment, you're just going to have to form a mental image. It's not hard. I'm bald. I've got a goatee. It's like someone drew a beard on a thumb and put glasses on it. I hope everyone's happy and healthy out there. I said it on the last episode, but I'm going to say it every single time until this thing is over and we've returned to something resembling normality. If you are out there and you are a essential worker at the moment, if you are stacking those shelves, delivering food, looking after people in your neighborhood as a volunteer, if you are nursing or doctoring through the COVID crisis, thank you so much from those of us that are passing the COVID crisis, hiding out in our homes, wearing pajamas and watching Netflix. Thank you so much. Now, we've got an excellent guest for you today. Not that they aren't all very, very good. But this one's a bit of a curveball. Now, we've talked to plenty of adventurers and ultra runners and endurance cyclists and record breakers. We've spoken to coaches, but this guy represents a group of people we've not spoken to before. It gets talked about a lot in ultra running circles, is the effects of sleep deprivation. You'll all have heard of sleep monsters. We've talked to, spine winners on this podcast in the past who've gone through days and days and days with barely any sleep to their names and had to cope with the cognitive and emotional aftermath of that. We all know how difficult it can be to manage yourself doing basic tasks when you're extremely sleep deprived and tired during a race. We're going to talk to somebody today who'll be able to tell us a little bit about why sleep's so important, about why it's so beneficial while you're in training to make sure you are reaping those rewards you're supposed to be getting from your training cycle. And that person is James Wilson, the sleep geek. So welcome, James. James, how are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you.
Yeah, well, I hope you're keeping safe and well.
Without it, it's a new normal, isn't it? So I'm adjusting to new normal. Being a sleep expert and a teacher to a 5-year-old, an 8-year-old and a 12-year-old is an interesting experience, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's a lot of that sort of multitasking going on at the moment, isn't there? And you're juggling a lot. That leads us straight into where we're going. You're juggling a lot. Are you getting enough sleep at the moment, James?
I am actually. I'm sleeping quite well. I think we maybe touch on it as we go through it. I think it's been interesting. I think we've got a little bit of a sleep social experiment going on where, because we took away the sort of the parameters of school and work in terms of a start time, we can use this as a chance to actually have the sleep that we need, and particularly around who we are as sleepers, because we're all different. So I'm sleeping as I should. My kids are sleeping as they should. Probably going to bed about the same time, maybe half an hour later, but getting up a little bit later. And it's been interesting, sort of feeding some of my thoughts around the school day. Probably starts a little bit too early for a lot of kids, and we could give them a better chance to learn and to be learning at a time they're most productive. So actually, I think sleep-wise, I've been pretty all right. Odd days not, but pretty all right.
Well, glad to hear it. Glad you're feeling sharp for the podcast. That's what I'm looking to hear. I'm doing fine. Predominantly, my major concern is, although you can see me in the sort of shoulder, chest, and up area where I'm wearing a shirt, I am in pajamas the rest of the time.
As we all are. We're all realising that we needed more pajamas. That's the problem.
It's all that's in my laundry now. I had to dig this shirt out and cut the tags off it when it came to getting on camera. That's not even a lie.
Saves ironing, doesn't it? Saves ironing at least.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And do rest assured, although you can't see me from the waist down, I am wearing pajama bottoms.
As am I, so we're both...
Yeah, there's a lot of sweatpants going around at the moment. Anyway, we've kind of leapt ahead, which is something I do pretty regularly on the podcast. Let's start with who you are, James.
So I'm a sleep geek. I'm manning glasses, knows a lot about sleep. I'm a sleep behaviour and environment expert. So I'm someone who works with organisations and I work with sports teams. So I work with people like Coca-Cola Hellenic, Red Bull, Pret a Manger, DFDS, the United Arab Emirates government, the Isle of Man government. I work with, I'm based at the English Institute of Sport. So I work out the AS in Sheffield. So I work with in sports. I work with football teams. I worked with Sheffield United last season. I worked with Lincoln City. I work quite a lot with Rotherham United, who's the team that I support. So I'm with them. I'm quite embedded within that team. So they're my little test bed. They allow me to test stuff within sport. But I do this because my family made beds and mattresses, and I couldn't sleep. So I was a man selling sleep products who couldn't sleep, and that was the start of my journey. Whilst running different businesses, we supplied into retailers. We ran a retail shop. We employed sleep experts, and they were often quite patronising. Quite it's your fault. Quite prescriptive. You need to do X, Y, and Z. Often, maybe based on what they do. And I felt poor sleepers deserve better. There wasn't much support out there. You go to your GP, you go to health professionals. There's not much support into the sleep. And I wanted to solve my own problem, to be honest. So the way my brain works, I thought if I train as a practitioner, I can sleep better. So I originally trained as a kids sleep practitioner with a sleep charity based in Doncaster. They work with families whose kids don't sleep. Whilst with them, I was the lead practitioner on a really big teen sleep project where we're working with about 2,000 teenagers in 5 schools. And then did some additional adult training. And started sort of like thinking, I was doing private work, but where can I influence as many people as possible? And I thought organisations would be a good way to go. So that was about 3 years ago now. And as I said, I've worked in different countries, I've worked in different organisations. And my approach is around, I want people to understand themselves. So who are you as a sleeper? What small changes can you make to your behaviours, your environment, and your mindset that will get better sleep? And nothing, a lot of this sort of the CBTI, which is cognitive behaviour therapy for insomnia, which is what we use to treat chronic insomnia, is quite difficult and quite demanding. And a lot of people drop out of that kind of treatment. And what I want to do, I think most people aren't chronic insomniacs, they're poor sleepers. And most people are doing some little things wrong. So actually, why do we need to sort of hammer people that you've got to do this, you've got to do that? How can we make it easy for people's lifestyles? So that's my approach. How do we make this stuff engaging and entertaining? So when I work within sports, we want to make it fun, and we want people to actually do it, because otherwise, what's the point? And then not make it too difficult, because we've all got like lives, we've got kids, we've got work, we've got exercise, we've got hobbies. If you start saying to people, you can't drink caffeine, you can't use your phone, you can't watch the TV, lots of can'ts within sleep. And I think sleep is about a feeling. How do you feel? Do you feel alert in the day? You've had enough sleep. Do you feel sleepy at a time that is right for you? Then you go to bed. It's quite simple when you break it down, but I think the academic experts, in particular the medical experts, they like to use flowery language. They like to show you how important they are. And I think I'm a little bit of an antidote to that. I am. How do we sort of translate the great work that academics and medical people do into something that's understandable? I work with chronobiologists. We have a chronobiologist we work with. We have a respiratory sleep expert. We have behavioural experts. Put it all together, and we've created an approach that we hope gets people sleeping better.
Oh, fantastic. So you've seen a problem that you were living with in your life, and you've gone out and learned an awful lot about it by the sounds of things. And it's an interesting area. It's an area that I think a lot of people have quite a cavalier attitude to. Sleep is always the first thing to go if you press for time. People always show off about how
the sleep bingo. I've had 4 hours, I've had 3 hours, I've had 2 hours, I've had none, I've got a kid, I've just had a newborn. That is what we do. And I think we need to change this very 80s attitude, this sort of, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Sleep is for the weak, this Donald Trump-esque. I'm proud that I only get 4.5 hours. Look at Donald Trump, some of the things that happens to Donald Trump. His hair is hay-like, skin is slightly orange, spouts drivel. That's what happens when you don't sleep well. So,
there is a man that could quite obviously do with being cognitively sharper.
That's it, exactly. So, and leaders are often like that, aren't they? The people who lead us often boast about the lack of sleep, and we want them sleeping well. No, I will not sleep until I solve this problem. Please do. You might get a better solution.
No, you're right. From a societal perspective, it's very much, well, if he's getting 8 hours sleep a night, then he's only working as hard as me, and they should be working harder than I am. So actually, sleep is a very important thing, and it might be nice at that juncture for you to explain to us why sleep is a very important thing. Because I am going to put myself in the category of somebody coming at this from the perspective of a complete layman. So explain to me why are we asleep?
So it sets that foundation that everything else is built upon that we do in terms of our well-being. It is important to physical recovery. So we're talking the theme of your podcast. Sleep. The first 2.5 hours sleep, deep sleep, slow wave sleep, is important to physical recovery. It's where our muscles regenerate. It's where we produce the growth hormone. It's where we recover physically. But also incredibly important to our emotional health. The later stage of sleep, REM sleep, is where we work through problems. It's where we are consolidating memories, and where we are deciding what do we want to keep and what do we want to get rid of. And actually, it's that REM sleep is the bit of sleep that when we're not sleeping well, that's the bit we miss. And if you think about it, when you have slept well, you can handle the world. I'm chilled. I'm ready. I'm ready to deal with anything. When you slept poorly, a lot of people. You sat there. Come on, someone come at me. I'm going to blow. I want someone to give me an excuse to lose my temper. And then when we talk about leadership, we look at leaders, and when leaders are struggling, it might be a football manager, it might be a politician, you can tell when they have not slept well, because they are struggling to sort of put their message across clearly. They are temperamental. They are liable to lose it. But that's why we don't sleep well. So it's fundamental to our physical health, fundamental to emotional resilience, our emotional health, fundamental to decision making. So within when I'm working within sports or within businesses, sleep is the thing that in that instant when we have to make a good decision, a good night's sleep gives us the tools to make that decision well. And I think if you think of it like that, sleep is a foundation. But the one mistake we make with sleep, I think particularly within sport, we have very high-performing individuals who, if they do X, Y, and Z in terms of nutrition, they will get this output. If they do X, Y, and Z in terms of their training regime, they'll get this output. But sleep isn't that. Sleep can't be forced. And this is where often high-performing individuals really struggle with sleep, because they are trying everything. They're laying in bed, desperately closing their eyes. And that's the problem. A lot of my work in that sort of arena, that high-performance arena, is taking some stress out of it. Actually reminding people, look how well you perform on very little sleep. That is what we're often trying to remind people, that actually when we are laying in bed at night going, I'm going to be awful tomorrow, I'm going to be the worst. No, because actually if you're a poor sleeper, you have learned to deal with poor sleep time and time and time again. And people I've worked with have scored goals at Wembley. They have led companies through awful times. They have won events despite not sleeping particularly well up just before the event. But what we do is try and get them sleeping quite well the rest of the time. The best sleep we can get. Sleep is not about perfection. It's about how can I get the best sleep I can tonight. That's the way we look at it.
It's an incredibly difficult thing as well, I guess, if you are coming from a sports person's mindset. You've spent your whole day in there, goal-oriented, focused, working hard, pumping up those stress hormones because you need them and you're going to push harder. You can't force yourself into a state where you're unconscious like that, surely, short of banging your head against a wall, which I'm almost certain isn't something you would recommend.
It's definitely not recommended. And this is where things like alcohol comes in, or sleeping pills, often used in sport. They sedate, they knock you out, they do not induce sleep. So what we think is sleep when we're taking sleeping pills, what we think is sleep when we drink alcohol or take other drugs, is not sleep. It's sedation. So the quality, you're not getting the good quality deep sleep for physical recovery. You're definitely not getting the good quality REM sleep for emotional recovery. So what we want athletes to be getting, what we want high-performing individuals to be getting, is good quality sleep, as much of it as possible that they need. But it might not, it might not be 10 hours. And this is sometimes where the academic research can be damaging. Often athletes are told, the research shows you should be getting 10 hours of sleep a night. I'm an athlete getting 6 hours. I'm a long way from 10 hours. I am therefore in my head failing. But when you actually talk to athletes and say, well, how do you feel? No, I feel fine. And this is a lot of the work I do, is sometimes unpicking. I've worked with, say, footballers who've been at another club, come to a club I'm working with, sleeping poorly, and it's because I've been giving them that sort of message. You should be napping. Everyone should be napping, and you should be getting 10 hours sleep a night. And for them as an individual, that's not possible. So we have to be very careful of prescriptive ideas of what good sleep is. We need to actually work out what good sleep is to us based on are we a good sleeper or a poor sleeper genetically? What's our sleep need in terms of quantity and quality? And what's our sleep type? Are we an owl? Are we a lark? Are we somewhere in the middle? Owl, go to bed late, get up late. Lark, go to bed early, get up early. Neutral, somewhere in the middle. Most of the neutral one way or the other. But if you're an owl going to bed too early, you're not going to fall asleep. And you just, that's not your fault. That's just the way you are. But then it becomes a blame game. Why can't I just fall asleep? Well, actually, you're probably going to bed a bit early. Or a morning lark who feels sleepy at 9:30. The body then adrenalizes because I think they want to be awake. And then at 1 o'clock in the morning, they're falling asleep, but still waking up at 6 because they're a morning lark. It's always quite, if we start at the start, who are you? And then we build a program around that individual to try and get the best sleep they can based on, an ultra runner is not an ultra runner. They're a person who is a person who happens to do that event. You know, football is not a footballer. They don't sleep any different to an ultra runner. We're all different as individuals. And I think sometimes we get into this mindset that, well, I'm high performing, I'm different. Therefore, that's why I sleep this way. No, you're a person with a set of sort of influences, and your stressor might be different. But everyone's got a different stressor. There's not one stressor that's more important or better than another. And I think we can get into that mindset as well. You don't know how hard it is for me. You know, that sort of attitude.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. I guess it's something that can be quite difficult for people as well, because it's something that can change quite a lot over the course of your life. It seemed to me that a button was pressed once I got past the age of 35, and now it's all I can do to be conscious. I'm mad for falling asleep now, whereas if you go back 10 years ago, I would very much describe myself as someone who suffered periodically from insomnia. There were periods in my life where sleep was just the most elusive thing in the world. So there's maybe a set of skills I developed there that are irrelevant to me now, but for other people it will have happened the other way around, where you have been a very good sleeper historically, and now perhaps you've entered a time in your life where you're not.
And that's quite interesting. Yeah, that happens. Kids come along, that happens. You being a good sleeper, nothing's impacted on your life. Kids come along, what on earth is this? Poor sleepers, they've been in training all their lives to have children. and I think, like for women in particular, now I think there's two events in their life: pregnancy and then the menopause, because the menopause is the same thing. So if you've had kids who slept well or not had kids, and then the menopause is, the way it sort of affects the body, so that hormones and biologically, it actually has a big impact on sleep, and therefore it can become quite elusive. And I think this is often the interesting thing, that it's not like I'm like you. I was a poor sleeper in my teens and 20s, and I'm far better now. But that's just about building understanding. And I think a lot of us who are poor sleepers, we learn. There are a lot of people I talk to who have been poor sleepers and are better. They've done the things that I suggest. They've understood themselves better, and I think that's always quite interesting. But like you say, you can have it the other way around, where people have been great, never had a problem because they've not ever thought about it, and then all of a sudden, well, how do I fall asleep? And that can be quite that sort of like, oh my God, how do I fall asleep? And then that worry, stress levels rise, cortisol levels rise, impacts on your body's ability to produce melatonin, and all of a sudden you become a poor sleeper. Where in fact, probably genetically, you're not bad. You know, that is you just start thinking about it too much. And in that situation, I'll just remind people, you do know how to sleep. Your body knows how to sleep. You just need to, bring that stress level down and relax about it, because it'll click back in.
A tremendously difficult thing to do. And I guess, we're coming from a point of view here on this podcast where we are talking to and about predominantly people involved in endurance sports. So there are long periods of their lives where, for a lot of our listeners, they are constantly in a training phase of some sort. And I do think still you do see this very cavalier attitude to sleep among people who are in training. So what if you needed to convince someone that's going through this kind of training at the moment of how important their sleep is, what are you saying to them?
And it's like being a pro athlete, isn't it? It's like you are training, numerous, like probably most of the week in the morning and at night. And often, like when I've worked with people with that kind of regime, they'll be finishing training maybe 9 o'clock, 9:30, expecting to go home, have something to eat, straight to bed and fall asleep. And then maybe not fall asleep until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, get up at 6, train again. And they're on that kind of cycle. And actually, sometimes it's going to bed. It might seem counterintuitive, but go to bed later, wind down more, and get better quality sleep, because that's the only time we've got sleep. Like, this is how is your life constructed, and how do we get the best sleep we can within the parameters of your life? And it might actually be being in bed less. And that sometimes people have a bit of a problem with that. Like, whoa, because being in bed and not asleep is just stressful. Where actually being in bed and you go in bed within 15 minutes of sleep, that's what we're looking for. So if you're struggling to get to sleep and you're finding night after night after night you're tossing and turning, you need to probably, if it gets to 30 minutes, you need to start again. Sleep alone, you can do that actually in bed. If you sleep next to someone, you need to get away from them, because they're mocking you with their sleep, and that will just get you more and more angry. But it's listening to something often. It's like letting your mind wander again, allow that heart rate to drop, and therefore you can drop off to sleep. I think this is that. I would say the biggest thing with sort of the training regimes that the people who are listening struggle with is like you said, not really taking sleep seriously. Like, well, Matt, I need to get X amount of miles in because that's what's important. Recovery is just as important as the training. You don't get the benefits of the training if you don't recover properly, because you're not getting the physical benefit, you're not getting the emotional benefit if you're not sleeping properly. And that can be the difference in high performance fields between winning, top 3 finish, top 5 finish, top 10 finish, and just be nowhere. Especially when you get into those like what people like to call marginal gains. So sleep is part of that, and I think a lot of us we're addressing lots of other parts of our behaviours and our environment in terms of marginal gains, but we're forgetting like a massive win that we could get if we just sort of understood our sleep better.
Absolutely. So is there a sort of tick list that you work through with people when you're trying to build better sleep for them? So say if I'm coming to you as a sports person saying I've, like when I was in training for doing my big ultra a couple of years ago, regularly I'd be getting up earlier than felt natural to go out and be training. I'd then be working full time. After work, I might find that I had another patch of training to go through. You're often then trying to go to bed with that last bit of training still spinning around in your head, and with those stress hormones you've talked about still literally buzzing around in your body. It can feel very difficult to get sleep then, and you get into that state you were talking about where sleep's just going to become more elusive now because you're stressed about the idea of trying to find it. Where should I be beginning there to try and get my sleep back in order?
So we start when we're working with the individual, and we'll talk about athletes in this situation because I think that's the best way. So we work with an athlete, and we'll start with who they are as a sleeper. So do we feel they're genetically a good sleeper or poor sleeper? We look at their sleep history a little bit, like who are they as a sleeper? We then, I work quite closely, as I said, with other experts. We might look at sleep types. So we're looking at, are they an owl, are they a lark, are they somewhere in the middle? So actually, if you're an owl, I would put as much training as possible later in the day. If I'm a lark, I'd do training early in the day because therefore you're going to get more from the training. You're going to be able to stick to the training regime more easily, and you're going to be able to have sleep that kind of like suits your sleep type. So within this environment, we're often looking at those sorts of things. So I think when we've understood that, we understood sleep needs. So like when we would do it on a normal sleep need. So are you a 6.5 hour person? Are you a 9 hour person? That gives us a bit of an idea of what you're looking at. And then we try and create a sleep routine that we're, winding down to bedtime is not maybe about, when we think about routine, we think about time. I need to be doing this at this time to do this at this time. What we want people to do is get a behavioural routine. When I do this, and this, then my body knows that the next thing that's going to happen is sleep. And that routine needs to be based around dropping heart rate, dropping core temperature. So we're doing things that drop our heart rate, drop our core temperature. The thing to remember, I think, particularly with when we are physically exerting ourselves as much as many people who are listening do, your body will fall asleep if it's sleep deprived. If it's shattered, it wants that sleep. It's an instinct. It will get it. But what we're talking about is sustaining sleep. Are we going to get good quality sustained sleep? We all wake up 3 to 6 times a night, everyone. When we're sleeping well, we come out of the sleep cycle, body checks to make sure we're safe, we go back into sleep cycle. Sleeping poorly, come out of sleep cycle, something triggers waking up, and then we start thinking. So we look at triggers, temperature, for athletes, high metabolic rate, therefore more likely to be hot. We need that drop in core temperature, that can be an issue. Is our sleep environment right to help us get the sleep we can? That might mean as simple as having a separate duvet to your partner so you can control your sleep environment better. We would look at, if waking at night, what the triggers are. Is it noise? Have you got a partner who snores? Have you got kids? Is it stress and anxiety? Because the thing to remember about stress and anxiety, as an animal, when we have predators, we were at our most vulnerable during the night. So your body, it's just generally the cortisol that's created, it does inhibit the production of melatonin. And if we think, in simple terms, when we are running away from a saber-toothed tiger, we don't want to feel sleepy. So it makes sense. Our bodies are designed to do that. And I think it's understanding these sorts of simple things. We try and get this information into our athletes in a simple and as quick way as possible. They don't need to understand the full way that every scientific part of the sleep process. They need to understand enough to be able to make the changes they need to make, and that's the way we base it. So we get the athlete to think about, before bed, dropping heart rate, dropping core temperature. Waking at night, how to get my mind to wander again so I can drop off back to sleep. Consistent wake-up time. So if we've got a non-training day, not laying in for 5, 6, 7 hours past what we would normally lay in, because we think we're catching up, because all that does is damage your sleep, because one of the systems that manages sleep is a pressure And that pressure starts the moment you wake up. So if your pressure starts at 6 in the morning, you'll probably feel sleepy about 11 o'clock at 10, 11 o'clock at night. If you move that 6 o'clock waking into 11 in the morning, well, where's your sleepiness going to go? Same with naps. Naps can be great. They can give you energy and productivity and alertness, but they can also reduce that sleep pressure and that urge to sleep. So think of sleep like hydration. The longer you go without it, the more you build up a sleep need. Sleep deprivation builds up. So if we relieve that sleep deprivation a little bit with a nap, could that affect our nighttime sleep? So if you're napping in the day, sleeping fine at night, no problem. Napping in the day and struggling to sleep at night, the naps might be the problem. And 30 minutes about that for a nap. So we would look at the individual, we'd look at where they're competing overseas. If they've got a competition season, for example, we're looking at how we manage the jet lag and how we manage the changes in the external environment, and we would take decisions on things like, are we going to arrive early and adjust, or are we just going to turn up and compete? And that can be different. It depends. Like, say a boxer has a one fight, so with that you would turn up and you would adjust. If you are, I was doing some work with a charity called SportsAid, and I was talking to a skier who was competing around the globe, here, there, and everywhere. Well, with that, we would be looking at what's their sleep type, how do we create like a sleep regime that gives them the best chance to get the points they need to get what they want from their world championships. So it's very, very different with every individual and every sport, but it's understanding sort of these principles that ultimately, dropping heart rate, dropping core temperature. Ultimately, what's your sleep type? What's your sleep need in terms of quantity and quality? Can we create a consistent routine in terms of behaviours before bed and wake up time in the morning?
Fantastic. I think it's important to get across to people as well when they are training that it's, you mentioned earlier, emotionally how important sleep is as well, how much you are cognitively sharper if you've slept well, you're emotionally more able to cope with with what's going on around you. If you've got to get yourself out of bed at 6 o'clock in the morning, you've got a half marathon to run before you've then got to get back and sort the school run, and then you've got to go to work. That sleep's even more important to you. And you might be robbing a couple of hours that you could be asleep in the morning, but maybe you need to find that sleep somewhere else, because you're going to be able to handle what you've got ahead of you. You're going to get more out of the training. You're going to enjoy it more, which is a benefit in the long run. If it feels like a horrible slog each morning when you having to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, if you are feeling like hell each time emotionally, you're going to be less motivated to do it as well. So sleep, I guess, in that sense is important as well, because it helps to keep you motivated through your training.
Definitely. I think that's where it can often be in sport. We talk about it. Emotions aren't talked about a lot within sporting environments and some of the environments I work in. And I think sleep itself is a very emotional thing. If you sleep next to someone you love, you're more likely to sleep well. You give your partner a cuddle before bed, you're more likely to sleep well. You compete overseas, you take the smell of your partner with you, you're more likely to sleep well, because that makes you feel more emotionally safe. Dropping heart rate comes from emotional security. I run drop-in clinics in the organisations and sports teams I work in. That can often turn into it's quite clearly someone's just sleeping next to someone they don't love. It's not a sleep issue, it's a relationship issue. So I think sleep is very much an emotional thing. And I think if we look at sleep a bit more like mental health, that you are on a spectrum in terms of in terms of your sleep, from like poor to good, and where are you on that in terms of your genetics, and then it's how you deal with it. So how do you deal with poor sleep? And I think when I look at endurance sports, a lot of it to me is the people who are the sort of world class at it, it's their ability to deal with sleep deprivation. As much as their ability to get into the right physical shape to run the event, it's also how do you deal with sleep deprivation. And we also start in terms of dealing with sleep deprivation, we start at a different place. And anecdotally and based on sort of like what working within sport, I'd say a poor sleeper is probably better suited to doing these sorts of endurance events than a good sleeper, because they've actually had a lot of experience of dealing with poor sleep throughout their lives and are less likely to be worried about the impact of poor sleep. Because if I was a poor sleeper and I was doing these sorts of events, my mindset would be, I can do it. I can deal with this. I've done it all my life. It'll be fine. I think that's quite an interesting part of this kind of sport.
Well, that we had a quick chat obviously before we started recording earlier, and that was something we touched on, wasn't it? That the example that I used was Jasmine Paris, who we interviewed a couple of episodes ago, did the Montane Spine race, 250 plus miles in 83 hours with 3 hours of sleep. But that was someone who, through her training cycle for that race, had been balancing being a working vet, being a mother of a very young child, and, you know, also doing a doctorate at the same time. So it was an almost endless amount of work in front of her and not an awful lot of sleep. So although having more sleep on the run into an event is probably a good thing to prepare you for it, she had trained herself to be able to cope cognitively with a very low amount of sleep.
So I think that poor sleepers, you know, often it's a great preparation for this type of event. I would argue that it might seem counterintuitive, but, you know, a poor sleeper is probably in a better state to handle, you know, an endurance event, which is not normal for the human. So I would hypothesize that it's maybe not the physical condition the person who wins the race is in. It's actually their ability to deal with that sleep deprivation, and that might be quite genetic, or it might be something they've always had in them. And it's quite interesting where these extremes, you put in the body under these extremes of the limit of your ability to handle poor sleep. You know, how an individual handles that, but also, you know, the long term effects on their health of that kind of extreme.
I guess during an event like that as well, a lot of runners, I mean, it's not recommended and it's a little controversial, but a lot of runners, most of them will use caffeine. Nothing controversial about that at all. Runners will bang that stuff down all day to keep themselves sharp. Obviously, that's going to affect your ability to sleep when it does come to you stopping. Some will then use sleeping pills to knock themselves out when it comes time to that. I mean, you mentioned earlier that's likely to have an effect on the quality of your sleep as well. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So I think when someone's been sort of, maybe when they're training, they've got a job and a kid, and they're trying to train, and they've got the stresses and strains. The people I think who are probably successful in getting the best they can, it's about quality of sleep. It's about how good is the quality of the sleep I am getting. And when I've worked with people, I remember I worked with a runner who was trying to get into Olympic team around 2012, and that was her problem: job, train at the end of the day, couldn't get to sleep. And actually what we did was, she had no more time to sleep, so we had to improve the quality of the sleep she was getting, and that was actually reducing the time she spent in bed. The problem with sleeping pills is that we see them as a solution. We see them as inducing sleep. Sleeping pills don't induce sleep. They sedate. They knock you out. They give the impression of sleep. They are great for people who have maybe gone through a stressful time, bereavement or divorce, and it reminds your body how to sleep. For like, you know, people who are poor sleepers generally, or people who are supplementing or doing an activity that creates, you know, a physiological response that is not great for sleep, then a sleeping pill will just knock you out, and actually the quality of sleep you get on it will be very, very poor, which then impacts on the ability to recover physically, incredibly important during an event, and our ability to handle things emotionally, massively important. And I think like we talked about the sleep monsters, I think, before we started, and the hallucinations. Yeah. That is often because you're not getting that REM sleep, because if you are sleeping during an event, you're probably getting deep sleep, because that happens in the first 2.5, 3 hours. But the REM sleep doesn't normally kick in until after that. And you know, I would, from what you've told me and from looking into the events, people are very rarely having more than 3 hours sleep. So they're going through maybe a 3, 4, 5 day event without having any of that lovely emotional resilient sleep. So you know, I imagine a lot of people maybe finishing races crying and not knowing why, and sort of, you know, dealing with.
You took the words out of my mouth. Yeah. I've seen people just cry into their breakfast randomly in the middle of a race, burst into tears for no understandable reason. Equally, to suddenly be euphorically happy at 3 o'clock in the morning in the pitch dark and not really understanding why. Cognitively, the memory lapses I've seen in runners. I remember a very successful runner bumping into me in the middle of a field in the dark in the middle of the night while I was just out doing photos, and walking directly up to me and placing his hands on my shoulders. And I just kind of let him do it. I'm like, these guys are in need. They're having a difficult time. And he just said, I'm really sorry. I just had to make sure you're real. You're the third person I've bumped into in the last half hour. He hadn't seen anybody at all. He had to know that I was real because he was so convinced he was seeing somebody. I've watched people snap themselves to and not have any idea why they're in the middle of a mountain range. Why on earth am I here at 3 o'clock in the morning? Yeah, and have to remind themselves, hang on, No, I'm in a race and I'm supposed to be here. Now, what direction am I supposed to be running? How long have I been doing this for, and have to piece it all back together again? The effects of sleep deprivation are wild on people who've been deprived of sleep for a long time. And it's in ultra running, you really see it face to face in a way that I don't think people normally on a day-to-day basis are used to seeing at all.
Yeah. And I think it's that there is nothing we can say in terms of training to prepare us for that. I think I would always start at the position of I'll get the best sleep I can, but within that be planning nights where I do wake up in the middle of the night and go for a run, just to start putting my body under that, see how I respond to it, see how I feel the next day. I just think it can be helpful. It can be like we'll do this with team sports. So within pre-season training, we will make them get up early, just to because we know during the season there'll be times where there'll be pressure put upon them, and we're not going to get perfect sleep. So it's the best you can get most of the time, and then maybe just planning in from time to time a little bit less sleep, see how you perform in terms of that. But the practicing how do I deal with the hallucinations? How do I deal with the not even knowing where I am and where I'm supposed to be going? I don't think there's much there's much we can do about that. And I think that as a person interested in sleep, that's the interesting bit. Like, what is the effect within the competition, but some of the long-term effects as well. Is there a long-term effect? And we probably won't know that for 20, 30 years after the person's put themselves under the pressure.
One thing that fascinated me in what you said earlier as well is that the idea of catching up with sleep. I think that's something that we've all said offhand at some point or other. The idea that, I've had a really tiring week, so I stayed in bed till nearly midday just to get some of that sleep back. You can't really get that sleep back, can you? So after one of these extremely long events, I think people expect the runner to flop into bed and not get out of it for another 24 hours, but it doesn't necessarily work that way at all. So
and I would always try, if the event, it depends when the event finishes, but if it was finishing, say, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I would try and stay up as long as I could, so I'm falling asleep as close to my normal bedtime as possible. And that might not always be totally possible, but that at least is trying to reset that body clock. If we're doing it with an individual, we would look at what they've got coming up next. Have they got another competition within a certain amount of time? But if they have, that is where we would try to do it. I support some of the staff at Rotherham United who did a 24-hour run for charity, and that's what we did with them. And they didn't think they'd be able to do it. They finished at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Like, I'll be straight asleep, James. And they weren't. We got them to between 8 and 10 o'clock, and they all felt they recovered quicker than expected because we got them back into another sleep routine. Now, those nights they probably did have more sleep than they would normally have, but then we kind of give them that one night because we understood that a bit emotionally they needed that, and then we tried to get the sleep as normalised as possible, as quickly as possible. And it is, within that we would be lots of light exposure early in the day. If you're trying to reset your body clock, so if you are competing in another country or you are sort of like wanting to try and get your sleep, if you have got a bit of intermittent sleep, and particularly at the moment with sort of the coronavirus crisis, one of the things we're talking to people about is actually get loads of daylight early in the day, because that helps our body's ability to know this is daytime, this is when I'm awake, therefore when it's dark I need to be asleep. And that is one thing we can be quite bad at normally within our working days. If you work, I have a lot of work in London. You work in London, your light exposure is very poor for a lot of people. And how do we get that light exposure? So it is. I think it's, if we come out of these events, it's trying to reset ourselves as quickly as possible, because you might have had 5 days of very little sleep. Well, we want to get back into a normal sleep routine. It's not then having 3 days of I'm unconscious, because I think that's the other extreme. And then you see your body's gone kind of like whoop, and it's gone whoop. And what we want to do is get it back to there, as quickly as possible.
Wow. No, it absolutely makes perfect sense. You mentioned there as well about the importance of daylight earlier in the day as well. That's something I hadn't really thought about before. I guess harder on some of the races I'm talking about, where they're often winter events where there might only be 5 or 6 hours of watery, wintry daylight during a 24-hour period in any case. So that's likely to have even more of an effect on their ability to get to sleep.
Yeah, and also it will make you more lethargic, and therefore you might feel sleepier. So you'll often find, in general populations, we have a little bit more sleep in winter, but feel a bit worse in the day. in summer we have a little bit less sleep but feel better. And that's the impact of light on us. So you can get little portable light boxes that can be really useful. So if you were competing and eating, for example, and if you could sit down, you could have a light box next to you while you're doing that, as long as it fitted into your kind of like when we're planning to sleep. So it's when we work with individuals, we are looking at light as a way of managing that body clock. The chronobiologists we work with, we're looking at like how do we use light to reset body clocks if we're traveling around the world? How do we use that light to improve alertness? Improve sort of like our ability to compete and train. So it can be, but light also does impact late in the day. Does impact on our body's ability to fall asleep. So you've got to be careful how you're managing it, and it isn't sort of a one size fits all. But light early in the day, as a general rule, helps our body, our alertness during the day, and our body's ability to sleep at night.
I think any ultra runner out there who can talk to you about events where they've gone through a night into the day again will talk to you about how important it is those hours where the sun comes back up again, how rejuvenating that can be. Even if at 4 o'clock in the morning you were at a point where you were ready to dig a hole in the ground and get in it, once the sun comes up, you will get a lot of your cognitive ability back. And that's, having been through it a couple of times myself, it's hard to believe how much of an effect that has.
No, yeah, it does, and I think it is. I think that it's one of those things we forget about. It's again this with sleep. We're always looking for a magic pill, or if I buy this, I'll get this. The media work I do. James, how does lavender work? Does aromatherapy work? Does buying a new mattress? All these things can work, but also they might not. But there are some sort of fundamentals in terms of like the way our bodies work and sleep. If we get them right, we just give ourselves a better chance. A lot of it is how do we use our body's natural rhythm to get the best sleep we can? And because we've all got a different natural rhythm, you're starting at understanding your own natural rhythm, and then how that fits into training, how that fits into eating, and therefore get those three things right. You probably emotional health's going to be better. So you get that sort of like these four pillars of our well-being right. We're more likely to compete and train better.
One thing that comes up quite a lot is people talk about the idea of power napping during these events. That if they are absolutely in a horrible mental state and they need to reset, they will just drop for 15, 20, like 30 minutes at the absolute most. I'm always surprised by how much benefit runners seem to get from that. Is that surprising to you, that a cat nap like that can have so much benefit? Because
it gives you that energy, a little bit of that energy, but you don't. The thing to remember is you don't get slow wave sleep, you don't get the deep sleep, and you don't get the REM sleep. So that is all about an alertness and a boost of energy. So it can reduce that pressure, can reduce the ability to fall asleep. So within training regimes, it's considering it properly. Within competition, it's a great trend, and it's often some athletes will take a shot of caffeine with it just as a go-to nap, because as you come out of the nap, you get the double hit of it takes about the same time to metabolize caffeine as it does to nap, and you're getting that sort of that double hit out of it. And again, different athletes do different things, but I in this sort of event, a 20-30 minute nap at most would be your friend. But you've got to be so careful you don't go longer, because then you wake up in deep sleep, and that's where you wake up in. That's where you're like, oh, and you wake up out of deep sleep and expect to be able to run as you want to. It's incredibly difficult. Then it's incredibly difficult to get the body going again. So yeah, like 15-20. If I was doing it, I'd be setting my alarm for 15-20 minutes just to make sure I didn't wake up in deep sleep, because I can imagine that would be horrible halfway through one of these events.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a fascinating little tip. I hadn't realized that. There's sort of congruity between how long it would take you to metabolize the caffeine and how long you would want for a power nap.
Well, there's a doctor in America who coined the phrase nappuccino to describe that. I don't know if it's paying royalties for using that phrase, but it is.
Please don't so.
Yeah, I think everyone needs. So this is that difference. Like, does it work for you? Try it. When you train, try it. Does it work? Put it into your competition schedule. That is the way I would do it. But it isn't. It might not work for everyone, and that's the way we try and get this across. That here's some general principles. Give them a go, but they're not set in stone. They don't work for everyone. It's this sort of thing with athletes where you will get, say, an athlete promoting a mattress. This athlete uses this mattress. You should too. They've got different body shape to us. They've got, they might have a different sport, and often they might have a core of steel. I am a very, very flabby man. I have not got the same core of steel. I would argue that athletes can get away with a poor mattress better than other people because the physiologically they've got a better structure. So I think it's and I think again that importance of sleep environment. If you are a high performing individual, that if you are someone who is very, very sort of sensitive to temperature, you might have bought a memory foam mattress because you were told it was good for your posture, but actually that foam can make you hot. And it's worth considering. A lot of the sports people I work with, they're waking up because they are too hot or they're in the wrong sleep posture. So if you sleep on your front, you are in an engaged position. If I was doing the events that your listeners are doing, I would be making sure I don't sleep on my front because the pressure it puts on your neck, your shoulders, your back, from your bum to your hamstrings is quite considerable, and it means you're more likely to get injured, and it means you're much less likely to be able to recover as quickly. Because when you're laying in front, you can't move as much during the night, therefore your quality of sleep is going to be impacted. Laying in front, you maybe wake up with pain in your neck, pain in your upper back, and we see that this maybe doesn't occur till into your late 20s with athletes, but when it does, it can be quite damaging to sort of niggly injuries, getting injured a lot. So even a simple thing like sleep posture. I work with a company from Finland called Unique Ulma, and they body map people. It's a company run by physios, and they then design pillows and mattresses around that individual and their sleep posture, their injury profile. And that's about these marginal gains. Like, how do I get a sleep environment when I'm training for 90% of the year? I'm sleeping in an environment that actually supports me properly. I think these things need. We probably don't consider a mattress being a piece of sporting equipment, but a mattress and a pillow are definitely, if you are a high-performing athlete, your mattress and pillow are as important as anything else you own because you spend more time on them than anything else you own.
It's an absolutely excellent point. As someone who, as I said earlier, spent a lot of their 20s as a sort of card-carrying insomniac, my bed now is outrageous. It is a nest. It is perfect. It is difficult to drag myself out of it. I will never underestimate the importance of having a good sleeping environment again. Once I've managed to sort of get through that process and find a way of getting sleep again. During an event, though, it's not unusual, and I mean this from working behind the scenes as well, it's not unusual to find myself trying to grab a couple of hours sleep on a cold floor under a table in the corner of a village hall or wherever it is that I happen to have fallen, probably restricted by a sarcophagus-like sleeping bag, so with not much choice about what position I'm going to be laying in. It's always going to be extremely difficult to have a sort of natural night's sleep like that. But are there any things I can be doing to help myself get more meaningful sleep if I'm in that kind of environment?
So I would, it depends what your posture's like, but it is about sleeping back in your side. It's trying to get something soft underneath if you can, even if that is just a duvet or another sleeping bag or something, or even a sleeping mat. If you're sleeping inside, maybe putting something between your legs to keep your pelvis in a neutral position. And I think, again, it's one of them. I think, like what a lot of stuff we've talked about, outside of an event, you're getting the best you can. In the event, you're getting what you can. And I think that is it. It's it's just trying to get the best sleep posture you can whilst you're in an event. Because I think you're not going to be sleeping very long anyway. So, you're not going to be in the same position for 8 hours like you would be if you're back home. So I think it's just, can I get myself in a position that keeps my joints in a neutral position as possible, my head's being supported properly as much as I can? Because if you bear in mind, anything you put into your head, it's about keeping your head straight. So we're trying to keep your head in that sort of straight position. You don't want to be like that. You don't like that. You don't want to be like that. You don't want to be like that. So it's just can we do the best we can with the things around us? I did see an interesting talk by someone on YouTube, which it was claiming that we don't need pillars, we just need your arm. I think he was sort of promoting a sort of paleo type lifestyle, a caveman type lifestyle, like claiming that. And I'm thinking, no, if I were a caveman, I'd be looking for some sheep's guts or something softer to put my head on.
I've made one out of moss. I'm a caveman, but I'd have a pillow.
Yeah, I don't think our arm. If you sleep on your arm, your arm's in an engaged position. It's going to be doing damage to the joint. So I think we've just got to understand that as neutral as possible in terms of our sleep posture. Trying to not sleep in our front and just get the best you can because you're not going to sleep very long anyway. So in some ways you don't get too comfortable because then that's when you might end up in the deep sleep.
Well, there you go. Ultra runners, for you guys listening out there, if you were hoping for a magic pill or a catch-all solution that's going to grab you those 8 perfect hours during a multi-day event, tough. Do your best is what we're recommending here. Do your best to get the best sleep that you can in the time that you've got. To bring this back to the real world then, for now, currently we are living through very unusual times. You'll no doubt have noticed. And I imagine sleep, you touched on this earlier, our routines have all been thrown out. What does Monday to Friday mean if you're not doing your 9 to 5 job at the moment and you've lost your waypoints during the day of, well, the kids will be up at this point and they'll do their homework here and they'll be going to bed. Suddenly our schedules all seem a lot more fluid than they did before. And I think generally people are more anxious than they have been before. So sleep for a lot of people is likely to be a little bit harder to find at the moment. What's a sort of, as an evening routine, what things should we maybe be doing or maybe be avoiding just to try and help improve the sleep that we're getting?
So I think if we look at it from a positive point of view, there's a chance to sleep as we maybe should do as an individual. So it's actually going back to those things we considered at the start. What's our sleep time? Am I going to bed at 10:30 because I need to get up at 6:30? And I always struggle to sleep a little bit, but I'm a bit sleep deprived, so I fall asleep at 10:30 and I generally get up at 6:30. Well, if you're a night owl, you don't need to be rushing to bed. So I think it's actually, it might be going to bed a bit later. We might need a little bit less sleep. A lot of the athletes I'm working with, they're finding that they're finding sleep more difficult because they haven't got the physical exertion that they've normally got. So it might even be, there will be a time of adjustment. The first couple of weeks, our bodies are adjusting. So accepting that it will take a little bit of time for our bodies to get used to this new normal. But remembering, we generally haven't got something to get up for now, so we don't need to be worrying too much. But we still want a routine. We want a behavioural routine. We want to be doing X, Y, and Z. So take this chance to, the hour before bed, bath or shower, drop your core temperature. Making sure we're ready for bed about an hour before we want to go to bed. So you've done everything you need to do to feel physically secure. You've locked the doors, you put the pets out, you've got your pajamas on, you brush your teeth. So when you feel sleepy, you can go to bed. One of the biggest mistakes we all make is we feel sleepy and then we start doing stuff. And that's a really big mistake we all make. So be ready for bed. Making sure you're steering clear of COVID-19 coronavirus talk in that hour. Pick good news sources. Make sure you've got facts that make that reassure. But that's not the time to be considering it. That's the time to be watching your favourite rom-com. That's the time to be watching trash TV. That's the time to be watching Tiger King. These are the things we should be doing in the hour before bed. It isn't about getting your brain going. Anything like a box set or murder mystery or crime drama, they're not great before bed. It's comedy, it's repetitive, it's trash. That's what you want. And like I said, it's letting your body wake. Get an idea of when your body's waking up. If you've got kids and you're having to work either end of the day when they're in bed, if you're an owl, do it late in the day. If you're a lark, do it early in the day. So it's working out these things around your sleep time. If you've got teenagers in your life, teenagers are more likely to be night owls. So this is a time that your teenager can actually have a learning routine and a sleep routine that is actually designed for their bodies. Where at the moment, for our kids, particularly our teenagers, we have a learning routine that's starting maybe at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they're not designed to be up until that time probably. So there is an opportunity here to create a sleep routine that works for us better, and I think that gives us better emotional health, but therefore impacts on our mental health better, allows us to deal with the stresses and anxiety that the crisis is putting us under, and actually a nice big social experiment where we can come out of it and go, I don't need to be starting work at 9 o'clock. I could start a little bit later, or I could start a little bit earlier because I'm a morning lark. I don't need. We maybe start looking at how the school day is constructed and the learning day for teenagers and people in their early 20s. So schools and universities start looking at things a little bit differently. I think it is. I think it's an interesting time, but I think going back to those principles of who am I as an individual? How can I design a pre-sleep routine that works for me? I have a wake up time that's quite consistent. An hour and a half lying is fine. Any more than that is going to start damaging your sleep. But take those principles and just apply them to now. And daylight early in the day, get a little bit of exercise. Don't worry too much about it.
Fantastic. Also, definitely do watch Tiger King. It is wild.
It is amazing. It is amazing. The one that, if you're looking for positives out of coronavirus, I would never have got Netflix and watched Tiger King if it wasn't for the coronavirus crisis. So I'm taking that as a positive.
You got to be thankful for the little things in this environment. You really have. Oh, well, amazing. James, I'd just like to say thank you very much. This has been incredibly interesting. You're a very different kind of guest to the kind of people we usually speak to, and I'm really, really glad we've done this. Also, I'm thinking when we are going out and doing one of these events, I'm going to have to drag you along at some point, because you need to see these guys when they're 80 hours down without sleep.
We would love to come and start poking and prodding and see what's happening. That's for sure. I find the great thing about my work is sleep's quite similar, but then you apply it to people, and that's where the interesting bit comes in. And when people are competing on those extremes, let's see what he does. Let's see what he does to sleep, and see how we can make it a bit better. That would be my win in all this. If we can just get people having a little bit better sleep in competition in their training schedules, then the podcast has been worth it as far as I'm concerned.
Well, fingers crossed then. It's felt worth it to me. I hope it's been worth it to you. Fingers crossed it's worth it for the people back home as well.
Definitely. If anyone wants any more information on what I do, I have a website, thesleepgeek.co.uk. I am on social media as The Sleep Geek. YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We are running some question and answer stuff during the crisis. So if anyone's got a particular question, or when they're training and they've got a particular question around something, we are trying to get that information out there. I'm always interested to hear from people, and like I said, we do work with athletes as well. So if anyone's interested in finding out more about the work we do with athletes, please get in touch.
Oh, fantastic. I'll make sure that we've dropped the links in and stuff like that in the descriptions below this as well. So if you are out there and listening to this and thinking, I want to talk to this guy before I go and do my next stupid length event, then look down. You'll find a link. Thanks very much, James.
Brilliant.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Sleep well.